Your Honor, is that Deja is found in the house that he was living in alone, in his bedroom, which was locked when any witness or the police came to that location. What the medical examiner's office noted was that Deja's neck was fractured, that she had over 58 stab wounds to her body by a sharp object.
I'm hurt, I'm numb, I'm angry. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what, but I knew something was wrong. And I want justice for my baby and my grandbaby.
On the Wednesday before Thanksgiving 2021, Deja Jenkins-Minus opened her phone and posted to Facebook. She wrote the words that were already forming in her chest before her fingers found them. She wrote that her daughter would never need for anything. She wrote that she could not wait to celebrate her first Thanksgiving tomorrow. She posted it publicly. She wanted the world to know. She was 22 years old, and she had a 2-month-old daughter named Delaney, and she was exactly where she wanted to be in her life, a young mother building something real, preparing for the kind of Thanksgiving that matters, not because the food is perfect, but because the person sharing it with you is here and alive and small enough to be carried in from the cold. That was her last Facebook post. The next morning, Thanksgiving Day, November 25th, 2021, she drove from her home in Boston to a house on Llewellyn Street in Lowell, Massachusetts at 1 o'clock in the morning. She brought baby Delaney with her. She brought the baby carrier. She brought a bag. The man who lived in that house, her on-again, off-again boyfriend Leonard Robinson, let them in. A neighbor across the street saw her go in. That neighbor, Roger Rondeau, had a feeling something was wrong when he saw her showing up at 3 in the morning. He noted the baby carrier. He noted the bag. He watched the door close behind them. Hours later, while Roger Rondeau was sitting down to his Thanksgiving dinner with his family, he looked out the window and saw Leonard Robinson drive away in Deja's car. She was inside that house. She was still inside that house. And she was not coming back to Boston for the Thanksgiving gathering her family had been expecting her at. She was not coming back at all. Welcome to the Crime Files TV. This channel covers the stories from Black American communities that deserve the full treatment, told with the depth and respect the victims and their families deserve. Subscribe now if you are not already here. This case has layers that the news cycle briefly touched and moved on from. We are not moving on. This is the full story of Deja Jenkins-Minus. Now let's start from the beginning. Deja Jenkins-Minus was 22 years old. She was from Boston, Massachusetts, one of the most storied cities in American history. A city that contains within its neighborhoods the specific layered texture of Black Boston, the communities that have persisted and built and organized and survived in a city whose relationship with its Black residents has always been complicated by history. Deja was part of that community. She'd family there. She had her mother, LaToya-Minus, who described her to WBZ-TV as a very uplifting young lady. That phrase, uplifting, is not a generic descriptor. It is the specific observation of a mother who watched her daughter move through the world and noticed the effect she had on the people around her. She lifted people. She brought something to the rooms she entered. She was the kind of person whose presence was felt as a positive force by the people who spent time with her. She had Delaney, 2 months old at the time of her death, the daughter she had described in her last Facebook post as someone who would never need for anything. Those words, "My daughter will never need for anything," are the specific articulation of a young mother's most fundamental commitment. Not I will try my best. Not I will do what I can. She said never, complete, total. A promise made publicly to the world in a Facebook post on the night before Thanksgiving by a woman who meant every word of it. Delaney was Deja's everything. The first Thanksgiving was not simply a holiday. It was a milestone. The first time the holiday calendar would include this specific new person who had arrived 2 months earlier and changed the shape of everything. Parents who have experienced a child's first Thanksgiving understand the specific quality of that anticipation, the sense that something ordinary has been made extraordinary by the presence of someone new. That is what Deja was feeling when she wrote that post on Wednesday. That is what she was building toward when she woke up on Thanksgiving morning and eventually drove to Lowell. Leonard Robinson was 22 years old, the same age as Deja. He lived alone in a home on Llewellyn Street in Lowell, a city in Middlesex County about 30 miles north of Boston along the Merrimack River. Lowell has its own complex identity, a former industrial center that became one of the first planned manufacturing cities in America in the 19th century, and that has since been home to successive waves of immigrant communities. It is not a wealthy city. It is a working city. And the home on Llewellyn Street, where Robinson lived alone, was the specific geography of a young man who had built a life that, by November 2021, had already produced a significant legal complication. Robinson was on bail from Suffolk Superior Court on firearms charges at the time of Deja's death. He had prior convictions for violent crimes and illegal possession of firearms. He was not simply a man with a minor legal history. He was a man who had already accumulated a record that had resulted in his being released on bail, with a specific condition attached to that release. He was required to wear a GPS tracking device at all times. That tracker was on his ankle on the night of November 24th and the morning of November 25, 2021. It recorded every location he occupied, every movement he made, including the movement he made to the Llewellyn Street address that night, and including what he did afterward. The relationship between Deja and Robinson was described by prosecutors and by people who knew them as on again, off again. That phrase describes a dynamic that is, in the research literature on intimate partner violence, one of the most consistently documented risk factors for escalation. On-again, off-again relationships are characterized by cycles of reunion and separation that can produce a specific pattern of emotional intensity and instability. The reunions are often accompanied by elevated emotion. The separations generate uncertainty about the relationship's status and about each person's claims on the other. And in relationships where one person has a controlling or possessive orientation, the uncertainty produced by an on-again, off-again dynamic can amplify the specific danger that possessiveness creates. There was another dimension to what was happening between Deja and Robinson in November 2021. Prosecutors, at Robinson's arraignment in Lowell District Court, revealed a piece of evidence that they identified as providing motive. Social media posts by Robinson, made in the period before Thanksgiving, questioned whether he was the father of Deja's daughter. He posted publicly that he was not sure Delaney was his child. He questioned whether he should demand a DNA test. He posted that he was angry at Deja. Those three elements, the paternity doubt, the DNA question, and the expressed anger, combined in a public social media record that the Assistant District Attorney Thomas Brandt told the court provided motive for what happened on Llewellyn Street. The specific emotional territory those posts describe is one that researchers who study intimate partner homicide have documented as particularly dangerous. The paternity question in a relationship is not simply a logistical dispute about biology. It is an accusation. It is a public statement that questions the integrity of the other person, that frames them as potentially deceptive, that introduces into the relationship a grievance that carries with it a specific emotional charge. When that accusation is posted publicly on social media, it becomes a performance. It reaches the person's community. It creates a narrative. And for the person it is directed at, it is not simply hurtful. It is a declaration of conflict made visible to everyone who follows the person posting it. Deja and Robinson exchanged text messages on the night of November 24th. Those messages brought her to Llewellyn Street. The contents of those texts are not fully detailed in the public record of the case, but their outcome is documented. She drove from Boston to Lowell at 1 o'clock in the morning with her 2-month-old daughter. She was expected back in Boston later that day for a family Thanksgiving gathering. She brought the baby carrier. She brought a bag. She went into the house on Llewellyn Street, and the door closed behind her. Roger Rondeau, who lived across the street, was awake at that hour. He saw her arrive. He said he had a feeling something was wrong when he saw her showing up at 3 in the morning. That instinct, the specific discomfort of watching something happen that does not feel right, is the kind of pre-incident signal that every person who has ever been in proximity to a dangerous situation and not fully known it describes. Afterward, he saw the baby carrier, he saw the bag, he watched her go inside. He did not know what was happening inside that house, but he noticed. He filed it away. And hours later, while he was sitting down to Thanksgiving dinner with his family, he looked out and saw Leonard Robinson driving away in Deja Jenkins-Minus's car. She was still in the house. She was still in the locked bedroom on Llewellyn Street, while Robinson ate somewhere and drove somewhere, and put distance between himself and what he had done inside those walls. And Deja's family, who had expected her at their Thanksgiving gathering, began to sense what most families sense when the communication stops unexpectedly. Something was wrong. They had a tool available to them that previous generations did not have, a phone tracking application. They used it to ping Deja's location. The app told them her phone was still at the Llewellyn Street address. They drove by the house. It was dark. Her car was not there. The house looked empty from the outside. They drove by again later. The same dark, the same absence, the same phone signal still anchored at that address. The specific experience of watching a phone's location on a map and knowing that the person connected to that phone is somewhere inside a dark and seemingly empty house, unable to reach them, unable to explain the silence, is one of the most excruciating forms of uncertainty that technology has made possible in the modern era of missing persons cases. The family called police. LaToya-Minus, Deja's mother, requested a well-being check. On the morning of Friday, November 26, 2021, the day after Thanksgiving, at approximately 10:45 in the morning, Lowell police responded to the home on Llewellyn Street. A family member of Robinson also arrived at the scene around the same time and entered the home. What they found inside was documented in court by ADA Thomas Brandt with the specific, controlled language that prosecutors use when the facts are already doing the work for them. He said a family member began to hit the door, kick it, and was able to gain entry into the locked bedroom. He said that person saw the body of Deja Jenkins-Minus on the ground next to the air mattress. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Delaney was not in the house. Baby Delaney, 2 months old, the daughter whose first Thanksgiving her mother had been counting down to in a Facebook post, written less than 48 hours earlier, was gone. She was not with her mother. She was not in the home on Llewellyn Street. And Leonard Robinson was not there either. The investigation that followed moved quickly, and the speed of that movement was driven significantly by the GPS tracker that Robinson had been required to wear as a condition of his bail. That tracker had recorded his location on the night of November 24th and the morning of November 25th. It had placed him at the Llewellyn Street address during the relevant time period. It had tracked his movements after he left. For a man who was attempting to create distance between himself and what had happened inside that house, the GPS tracker was the most comprehensive and most irrefutable witness to his movements that investigators could have asked for. He had been required to wear it because the court considered him a flight and public safety risk. The irony of that requirement producing the evidence that connected him to the crime scene is one of those details that the legal record preserves without commentary because it does not require any. Investigators located Delaney. She was found safe in Boston. The 2-month-old who had been brought to Llewellyn Street in a baby carrier on the night of November 24th, who had been inside that house during whatever happened inside that locked bedroom, was physically unharmed. She was alive. She was with someone. The specific details of how she came to be in Boston, whether Robinson had taken her from the scene and delivered her to someone, are part of the investigation that the court record has not fully detailed publicly. What is confirmed is that baby Delaney was found safe and unharmed. That confirmation, delivered by Middlesex County District Attorney Marion Ryan and Lowell Police Superintendent Kelly Richardson at the press conference announcing Robinson's arrest, is one of the few pieces of information from this case that arrives without weight attached to it. Robinson was located in Boston and arrested on Monday, November 29, 2021, 4 days after Thanksgiving. He was arrested without incident. He was brought to Lowell District Court and arraigned on Tuesday, November 30th. ADA Brandt laid out the prosecutor's account of what the evidence established. The text messages that brought Deja to Lowell, the GPS data placing Robinson at the scene, the social media posts providing motive, the knife found near Deja's body consistent with the murder weapon, the medical examiner's findings. Robinson was stabbed, as the court would later be told, 58 times. Her neck was fractured. Those two facts, 58 stab wounds and a fractured neck, belong together in any honest accounting of what happened inside the locked bedroom on Llewellyn Street, because together they describe the specific and sustained nature of what Deja Jenkins-Minus was subjected to in the final moments of her life. 58 is not a number that arrives from a single act or a single moment. It is the documented evidence of prolonged, sustained violence directed at a person who had driven 30 miles in the middle of the night with her 2-month-old daughter because someone she had a relationship with had sent her text messages on Thanksgiving Eve. A fractured neck compounds the picture of violence that the stab wounds already establish. Together, they are the medical examiner's language for something that the people who love Deja have been living inside the emotional reality of since the morning of November 26th. Robinson pleaded not guilty at his arraignment. He was held without bail. His attorney declined to comment. The court denied his subsequent request to be transferred from the Middlesex House of Correction to a different facility where he claimed his safety was at risk. The court cited his prior convictions for violent crimes and illegal firearms possession as the basis for continued detention without bail. Latoya-Minus sat in the courtroom or received the reports from the courtroom as the proceedings unfolded and chose not to speak to cameras when she left. She posted on Facebook instead. She wrote that life for her would never be the same. She said she needed time to adjust. She asked people to keep the love pouring in and to keep her daughter's memory alive. She wrote that until she was ready, she needed privacy. The restraint of that message, the specific dignity of a mother who is processing something unsurvivable and choosing to do it privately while acknowledging the community around her, is one of the most human documents in the full public record of this case. She also told WBZ-TV, in the brief public statement she made, that her daughter was a very uplifting young lady, that she was lost, hurt, numb, that she was angry, and that she wanted justice for her baby and her grandbaby. Latoya-Minus used those two words together, her baby and her grandbaby, 2 generations in one sentence. Her daughter Deja, who was 22 years old and whose first and only Thanksgiving with Delaney ended before she could eat the meal, and Delaney, 2 months old, who was carried into a house on Llewellyn Street in a baby carrier at 1 o'clock in the morning, and who will grow up in a world that does not have her mother in it. The case against Leonard Robinson is moving through the Massachusetts court system. As of the most current publicly available record, Robinson had been held without bail pending trial. Massachusetts murder trials can take years to reach conclusion, particularly when the case involves extensive electronic evidence, GPS data, and a forensic record that requires expert testimony to present fully. The Middlesex County District Attorney's Office has the GPS records. They have the social media posts. They have the knife. They have the medical examiner's findings. They have the neighbor's account. They have the phone tracking data that placed Deja's phone at the address and the GPS data that placed Robinson there at the same time. Leonard Robinson is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. That presumption is part of the legal framework that governs every person charged with a crime in the United States. And it is stated here without equivocation. What is not in dispute is the documented record that exists, the Facebook post, the text messages, the 1 a.m. drive to Lowell, the neighbor's account, the GPS tracker, the locked bedroom, the body, baby Delaney safe in Boston. Those facts exist in the official record regardless of what a jury ultimately determines about Robinson's guilt or innocence. Let's talk about what this case reveals about the specific danger of the paternity dispute within an intimate partnership. Because the social media posts that Adia Brandt cited as motive are not simply a backstory element. They are a window into a specific and documented category of risk that researchers who study intimate partner violence have identified as particularly serious. When a man publicly questions the paternity of a child in an existing relationship, he is doing something that goes beyond expressing private doubt. He is constructing a grievance. He is creating a public narrative in which his partner is framed as potentially deceptive, in which the child shared between them becomes a source of conflict rather than connection, and in which his own anger is presented to his social network as justified. That grievance, once constructed publicly, has a momentum of its own. It generates responses from friends and followers. It produces a public forum for the conflict, and it transforms what was a private relationship dispute into something that now involves an audience. For the person the accusation is directed at, the public nature of that accusation creates its own kind of pressure. It demands a response. It requires engagement. It makes silence feel like an admission of the thing being accused. And it can produce exactly the kind of midnight text exchange that brings someone across a county line at 1 in the morning to address something that has been escalating publicly and cannot be resolved by ignoring it. Deja Jenkins-Minus was responding to something. She was responding to text messages. She was responding to a public dispute that involved her daughter, her relationship, and her reputation. She drove to Lowell because whatever those text messages said, they required a response that she felt she needed to give in person. She brought Delaney because she was a 2-month-old and she was not leaving her 2-month-old alone. She walked into a house at 1 o'clock in the morning because she believed the conversation she was going to have was one that needed to happen. None of that constitutes a failure of judgment or a mistake on her part. She was a 22-year-old woman navigating a relationship that had become publicly hostile in ways that required her to respond. She did what people in her situation do, which is engage directly with the person who is causing the conflict. She had no way of knowing that the person she was engaging with had already crossed a threshold that made the conversation she was planning to have impossible. The research on intimate partner homicide is consistent on this point. The most dangerous time in any relationship that contains controlling or violent dynamics is not the period of active conflict. It is the period in which the dynamics are shifting, in which one person is asserting something and the other is resisting that assertion, in which the balance of access and control is in flux. A paternity dispute that has been made public is exactly that kind of shifting dynamic. It introduces new terms into the relationship. It creates a grievance that the person expressing it feels entitled to have addressed, and it can produce, in the most dangerous scenarios, the conclusion that the other person's failure to satisfactorily resolve that grievance justifies an extreme response. Deja Jenkins-Minus was 22 years old. She was a very uplifting young lady, by her mother's account. She was a woman who committed, publicly and in writing, to making sure her daughter would never need for anything. She brought Delaney to Lowell in a baby carrier at 1 in the morning because the relationship she was in had produced a conflict she felt she needed to address in person, and because she was not the kind of mother who would leave her 2-month-old daughter at home alone. She was found in a locked bedroom with 58 stab wounds and a fractured neck by a family member who had to kick the door in. Her daughter is alive. Baby Delaney, who was 2 months old on Thanksgiving 2021, is growing up in Boston. She is in the care of family that loves her. She will grow up knowing who her mother was from the people who loved Deja and from the photographs and the Facebook posts and the specific record of a 22-year-old woman who wrote the night before Thanksgiving that her daughter would never need for anything. Delaney will know that her mother meant it. She will know it from the family that is raising her in the spirit of what Deja promised. She will know it from the community that has kept Deja's memory alive. Latoya-Minus said she wanted justice for her baby and her grandbaby. That is the specific and complete statement of what accountability means in this case. Not just for Deja, for Delaney too. For the grandbaby, who will grow up asking questions that the legal proceedings, whatever their outcome, will only partially answer. If you or someone you know is in a relationship where paternity disputes, public accusations, or escalating conflict on social media are creating a situation that feels volatile or unsafe, please take that seriously. Please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Free, confidential, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by call, text, and chat at thehotline.org. The specific danger of a conflict that has moved from private to public is real and it is documented. Please do not navigate it alone. Subscribe to the Crime Files TV. Share this video for Deja, for Latoya-Minus, for Delaney, who will grow up knowing her mother loved her enough to write it down the night before Thanksgiving and post it where the world could see it. Her last post said she could not wait to celebrate her daughter's first Thanksgiving. She meant every word.